Good afternoon from London. I'm Sergey Mastitsky, head of data science at NEST Centre. This week, we are focusing on Russia's modernization dilemma. Two events over the past week brought this into sharp relief. On June 6, visibly irritated Vladimir Putin berated his ministers for not keeping up with ambitious plans to develop drone technologies. On Monday and Tuesday, the Forum for the Future 2050 took place in Moscow. The forum was organized by the Tsargrad Institute, a group associated with highly conservative thinking. It was attended by several Western far-right figures and addressed, among others, by Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov. Apparently, the Russian authorities are trying to develop an ideological vision for the country's development, a vision that rejects Western-type liberalism but keeps open channels to Europe, Russia's traditional source of modernization. It is not hard to see, though, that these goals do not sit comfortably. Moscow's hope is that far-right forces in Europe will become more prominent and support pragmatic relations with Russia based on common goals that are not exactly liberal. Our speaker today is Nikolai Petrov, the head of analysis of transformation processes at NEST Centre. Before we start, though, can I please remind our viewers and listeners that we welcome questions and comments during the session, and please post them in the chat function. Nikolai, it's great to have you with us again, and I think it would be useful to first take a step back and put things into perspective a little bit. In its report to the Munich Security Conference 4 months ago, the NEST Centre estimated that the Kremlin could sustain the war in Ukraine in its current form at least for a year to a year and a half. Has that assessment changed since then?
Thank you, Sergey. Thank you, our listeners. Well, our general view of the situation didn't change in these 4 months. And when presenting this report, to the Munich conference, we did look at very different spheres, how economic development is going on, what is happening in military-industrial complex, how public opinion is ready to support or not to support the Kremlin, should we wait for any split in elites, how center-regions relations are looking, and so on. And our basic conclusion that there is nothing which is pushing Kremlin now to look for the way out of this horrible war didn't change. Although there are certain signs that the Kremlin is, at the beginning of the end of the so-called zone of comfort, when it was possible to continue the war without taking any risks. When discussing this, we had in mind risks of mass mobilization, but now it looks like it's becoming more complicated for the Kremlin to keep the vision inside Russia that the war doesn't touch them, doesn't touch ordinary Russians, and that's why discussions have intensified about how to keep not only Russian economy afloat, which is not a big problem for the Kremlin, at least in horizon of a year or year and a half, but how to keep transportation working, how to keep civilian industry working, and everything else.
I see. Thank you very much, Nikolai. I think that puts my next question into quite a good context. Let's take a closer look at that meeting of the Council for Strategic Development and National Projects chaired by Vladimir Putin last week. As I mentioned earlier, he voiced quite a dissatisfaction with funding cuts to 2 national projects, machine tool building and robotics and transport mobility. And these cuts, surprisingly, came just a few months after the projects had started. So the question is, what do you make of that? And more broadly, what can we read into the format, the tone and content of that council meeting?
First of all, I think that this is very important meeting, and there is a lot of information we can look for when, well, reading the script. It wasn't published in full, but nevertheless, it's pretty long. And what is important, I think, is the fact that the regime still has substantial financial resources, if especially it goes about addressing the most critical priorities, and well, airplanes and well, industrial equipment is of course a high priority for the Kremlin. However, the notion that any problem can be fixed simply by injecting money is no longer valid under sanctions. In the defense industry, it was possible for the Kremlin to switch to revert to less advanced models, but in sectors like machine tool manufacturing and civilian aircraft production, the situation is fundamentally different. These industries depend on long and very complicated supply chains and capacities that must be rebuilt from scratch in many cases. And it means that the Kremlin cannot achieve result needed in a short while, not to speak about a kind of vicious circle which emerges. There are neither sufficient production capacities nor necessary technologies and equipment to create them. This is not to speak about labor shortages, especially in terms of highly skilled workers, even though financial resources remain available. In the machine tool sector, for example, domestic production volumes have grown up 2- to 3-fold last 3 years, but now they are not growing, and the share of machine tools produced domestically, produced in Russia, is something in between 10 and 30%, and it cannot increase essentially. So if to speak about the very format of the meeting, it's needed to emphasize that this is the first meeting after national projects have been adopted finally at the end of the last year. So they should discuss first results and how it's going on. And it has been organized in such a way. Several top civilian managers came to Putin, to Nova Ogareva, like Mishustin, the prime minister, his first deputy, Manturov, Siluanov, the minister of finances. But majority of participants of this discussion did participate in it online, and that was the whole government. But there were also 20 persons from the state council, governors, who are chairing commissions of the state council. And we can see that the role of the state council is steadily expanding. So the published transcript includes selective portions of this discussion, and the reason, well, the aim was first to demonstrate effectiveness and good results of the first several months of realization of these national projects. But Putin appeared to be visibly irritated. On the one hand, certain secondary targets, like, say, related to infant mortality, were already achieved now instead of 2030 as it was planned initially. But in some other cases, like in case of those projects you've mentioned, in case of transportation mobility, and in case of machine tools building, well, the goals were not achieved, and those projects were underfinanced, not due to the fact that the government could somehow decide and cut off finances of these most important projects of the Kremlin, but due to the fact that money, money no more capable to give results needed. Like recently, before this meeting, it was announced that the program of financing domestic planes production will be financed much less than it has been planned. But the reason why was that there are no planes, there are no models which can be produced, there are no capacities where these models can be produced, and that's why there is no way for the government to spend this money. And it's the same with drones. It's the same with satellites. For more than a year, the Kremlin discusses how exactly it's possible to increase production in these spheres, but the situation does not change essentially. So Putin's behavior and his demonstration of being angry can be described by first, being angry not with regard to bad work of the government, but with the impossibility to reach goals which were defined. And second, the need to demonstrate population that it's not him, but it's not Tsar, but bad boyars who are responsible for these problems.
I see. Let's continue with this topic on the initiatives related to country's future development. As far as I know, President Putin also recently announced the creation of a special working group focused on development institutions. And this group is going to be led by Igor Shuvalov, head of the State Development Corporation WebRF. What should we make of that move?
I think this is very interesting decision, if especially to have in mind that WebRF already was coordinating the work of all development institutions, 15 development institutions. So in general, what has been changed is the role Igor Shuvalov should play with regard to national projects in general. And I think this is usual Putin's way to promote internal competition within the government. And now, instead of having one leader, Mikhail Mishustin, and one overseer, Oreshkin, who are responsible for national projects, Putin did add the third person, Igor Shuvalov, to make perhaps to force Mishustin to work more efficiently, more intensively. And this is Putin's usual method, personnel reshuffles and the creation of internal competition. But I don't think that it will lead to any serious positive results.
Very interesting. Right. Finally, maybe, how would you assess the Kremlin's planning horizon overall? Is there any indication of a long-term strategy at all?
When answering this question, we should have in mind not only this particular event, not only national projects, but several different meetings which took place recently, including the meeting yesterday and the day before yesterday on production of arms, and the program which has been adopted recently on Navy development till 2050. So at first, the state program of arms production is planned till 2036 and Navy till 2050. And this is not fictional. It doesn't mean that the Kremlin has a very detailed step-by-step program for next 10 to 20 years. But it means that autocrat, unlike democratic leaders in countries where they are elected, well, does not need first to be afraid of forthcoming elections and to say pleasant things to his voters. That's why autocrats, and we do see this not only in case of Russia, but in case of many other countries like Turkey, for example, autocrats can be more strategic than democratic leaders. And what is important is the fact that not only the Kremlin does have and develops long-term strategies and plans, but the fact that it does realize these strategies. And one good illustration is the construction of industrial plants at the Far East. And Putin, in one of recent meetings, did tell that we do know that it takes longer and it will be more costly, but interests of the country dictate us to move our industry from Western regions to the East, meaning that in general, confrontation with the West in this or that form is planned by the Kremlin to continue for pretty long, and there are real preparations for this.
I see. Thank you very much, Nikolai. We do have a question from our audience. Marsha Olive is asking, are any modernization projects linked to external partners, such as, for example, partners from Central Asia, the Caucasus, or, say, Iran?
Yes, of course. The Kremlin is much more limited now in cooperation with other countries, but we've seen this cooperation with Iran, for example, was going on not only in terms of drones production, but in terms of airplanes and possibilities to provide repairment works. In case of Uzbekistan, for example, there is an idea to use Tashkent airplanes plant in order to provide Russia with capacities needed to produce bigger amount of passenger planes. It's going on. The problem is that China is not such a reliable partner in a sense that China is very cautious with regard to Western sanctions, and Chinese investment are very much to Russia are very much limited, and this cooperation is going on, but in a very limited scale. And we should have in mind that the next 18th package of European sanctions plans to punish a couple of Chinese banks which are assisting Russia to circumvent sanctions, meaning that Chinese eagerness to cooperate with Russia will decrease. But it's perhaps even more important that there was, for example, large-scale project joint venture between Russia and China to construct a huge passenger plane. But finally, it appeared that China, being not that much limited as Russia by sanctions, does use a lot of Western-produced ingredients, spare parts, and that's why they can no more cooperate with Russia. So I would say that most sophisticated projects are closed, but the Kremlin looks for any opportunity to find a way how to go forward and how to use those capacities in those countries which are still considered to be friendly to Russia.
I see. Thank you very much, Nikolai. While we are waiting for hopefully more questions from our audience, may I ask you to comment on that Forum for the Future 2050 that took place a few days ago in Moscow? What do you think it was? What's the meaning of it?
Well, first of all, I think that, well, it's absolutely not that important to look attentively at what has been said there. We can see that there is internal competition in this particular case between Mr. Malafeyev and Russian Patriarch. Well, they did express ideas similar to what they are saying for long. They are strongly in support of traditional values. And what is more important, I think, in this particular sphere, it's the fact that recent Security Council meeting was devoted to traditional values. And for the first time in many months, there was script of this meeting where the Kremlin did demonstrate strong support of traditional values, demonstrating that Russia is a bastion where these traditional Christian values are kept. And this is, I think, more important, the idea that, now there is certain improvement in relationship between Russia and administration of the United States. And the Kremlin should wait for a while, should promote further electoral successes of right-wing parties in Europe, and something similar can happen in Europe. And the Kremlin is already offering the base for its potential allies and offering assistance to these allies and to those parties. And I think this calculation is not absolutely avoided of any real ground.
Interesting. So if I understand correctly, you're saying that there are also quite tight relationships between what's happening in Russia and, say, the MAGA narratives we hear about.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not that public. The forum you've mentioned is, marginal one, but nevertheless, it demonstrates how strong Russia, or at least certain parts of Russians are, defending traditional values. And perhaps like during 30s, 40s, 50s, when Communist Party did demonstrate support of those things which were shared by a lot of persons abroad, including at the West. Now this emphasis on traditional values can serve a very positive role for the Kremlin, demonstrating that there are some countries on the globe where these values are still kept, where they are strong, and we should look at these countries and we should support them.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. I don't think we have any further questions from our audience. Then we probably could wrap up for today. Many thanks to our viewers and listeners for joining us. Thank you, Nikolai, of course, for sharing your knowledge. The midweek briefing will be back next Thursday as usual, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much.